Hello and welcome to episode 131 of Radio Gore-Press. I'm Sarah, joining me as always, as most of
as
the
mostly,
time.
I always think that, like, as always. I mean, that's not right.
No,
I've definitely not always been here.
It's definitely not an absolute. Phil is here.
That is true. That is a statement of fact.
It is. Not always, but this week. How are you doing?
I am melting.
It's pretty hot here in the UK, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of an understatement. I think it's, we have quite a lot of listeners in the States and in India and in Australia, and I'm sure they'll be mocking us relentlessly for thinking that 27 degrees is just untenable. But we're not used to it, and we don't have aircon, so...
That's the thing. That's the kicker, isn't it? We're not used to it. We're not used to the heat, and we have no provisions to deal with it.
We don't have provisions for any sort of extreme weather. The British are not good at this. We don't cope well. So apologies in advance if you hear either of us like sticking to or sliding off of our chairs.
I have made a conscious effort to keep my mic as far away from my laptop as possible, just in case it picks up the fan whirring away.
Ugh, we're working with what we've got, guys. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't really know how to preface this show. There's no good way to start. For some reason, and this was my choice, but for some reason I thought it would be an excellent idea to cover 1973's The Exorcist.
Which is the horror film.
Right?
It's like the horror film, right?
It's so well loved and so well covered. And I'm not entirely sure what we're going to bring to the table that hasn't already been said, but we'll try. We'll certainly try.
Give it a go.
I mean, do you want to get stuck in?
Sure. I mean, we've announced the movie. Might as well.
That's how these things work, isn't it?
Didn't ask you how you were, but doesn't matter.
Didn't.
We're talking about The Exorcist.
That's very
I was
rude.
going to, and you were like, no, I want to talk about the film now.
I mean, all right, fine. But yes, 1973, written by, or based on a story...
William Peter Blatty.
By William Peter Blatty. Which is part of a very obscure and nonsensical private joke amongst Radio Gore-Press. That I'm not sure. I know it originated from a horror pub quiz.
That's all I remember.
Yeah, and that's the beginning and end. Maybe I'll figure it out and we can explain it over on one of our social medias. So you just have to follow us, guys. Shameless self-promotion. Yes, directed by William Friedkin, who I had a bit of a trawl through his back catalogue. Hasn't done a great deal of horror.
Okay.
I mean, I think it was more common, correct me if I'm wrong, obviously with exceptions for people like Hitchcock. There are notable exceptions, but kind of back in the 70s it was, and 60s in fact, it seemed more common for high-profile directors to sort of dip their toes into the horror genre and then just scarper, never to return.
I think it's only really been not recent per se, but it's quite a high risk genre to be dealing in. You know, you think about all the controversy that surrounded The Exorcist, and that's gone down as like one of the best horror films of all time. And yet, when it was released, there was all sorts of controversies going on. You know, and
I mean, all the best all the best things are never appreciated in their time.
Which is why we're going to be like Radio Gore-Press in 50 years' time. Radio Gore-Press is going to be...
Oh, bless you. That's so optimistic. You think there are still going to be humans on the planet in 50 years' time?
Don't.
We'll have died out. Come on. The planet will be fine. The human race are fucked. George Carlin had it right. But yeah, do you want to give us a synopsis, Phil? I mean, I assume this is a film that basically everybody has seen as a rite of passage. But in case you fancy spoiling the ever-loving shit out of it for yourself and you're watching this blind, listening to this blind, rather. Wait, that was a terrible sentence. Listening to this blind. In case you're going in deaf, Phil's got a synopsis for you. I hate myself.
I mean, that's the equivalent, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense, but anyway. One of the most profitable horror movies ever made, this tale of an exorcism is based loosely on actual events. When young Reagan starts acting odd, levitating, speaking in tongues, her worried mother seeks medical help, only to hit a dead end. A local priest, however, thinks the girl may be seized by the devil. The priest makes a request to perform an exorcism, and the church sends an expert to help with the difficult job.
Yeah.
Which is The Exorcist.
I mean, it's more of it's less of a synopsis and more of just like a run through
the actual
of
film.
Things that happen in the film. But it's fine. We've had worse. A couple things.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever witnessed anybody speaking in tongues in real life?
Not that I can remember.
I have. It's weird. It's so strange.
Okay, define speaking in tongues.
Gibberish.
You need to explain yourself.
Okay. It's an absolute delusion whereby the person was at a religious retreat and just started yelling gibberish under the guise of being like inhabited by some sort of spirit.
Mm.
It was deeply weird, and it's not something I ever wish to see again.
I mean, because I was going to say, if gibberish is all it is, then yeah, I mean, I've seen Steve Carell and Bruce Almighty, right? Fair, yeah.
Yeah, I was young enough that I hadn't seen The Exorcist at the time, so it wasn't creepy. It was just very odd.
I can imagine.
Second thing, relating to the synopsis, so I had no idea how much this film cost and how much it made. So just the line about it being the most profitable, I wonder, like, when that synopsis was written and if that fact still stands.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
That's a fair point.
Because I did look up last night. I was trying to figure out how much the film had cost. And in doing so, I also found out how much it had made. So apparently it cost an estimated $11 million.
Okay.
And it made an estimated $441 million.
Okay.
Now,
yeah, that's pretty profitable.
But when I read that, I was like, shit, that's got to have been adjusted for inflation, right?
Mm.
That seems like an insane return on your money.
Mm.
But I don't know, man. I feel like if they'd adjusted the intake for inflation, they probably also would, because it was from the same source. So you would assume that they would also have adjusted the budget for inflation as well.
Yeah, you would have thought so, because that seems pretty obtuse to use one kind of the value of money from one year and
that's crazy,
the same value from another,
isn't it?
Mm.
I knew this film was a commercial, like a relative commercial success, but it was also banned for a huge amount of time. So I imagine a lot of there was probably at least a period of like, I feel like I remember reading it was 1988 to about 98, 99, where it was basically inaccessible, completely prohibited. So you imagine most people watching it during that pretty lengthy period of time would have been doing so illegally, and therefore nobody was making any, well, the filmmakers certainly weren't making any money from it, the studios. So that's insane.
But I think that sort of thing really drums up hype as well, because there was stories of apparently in England certain cinemas banned it, but not others. And so there were stories of people basically getting buses to go see The Exorcist in the next town over or something like that.
I mean, you would,
just
though, right?
En masse,
Wouldn't you? I would.
I think so. Yeah,
I would 100%. If somebody talked about a film the way people talked about The Exorcist, I mean,
Would you though?
Yeah, 100%. I would hop on a bus and do a pilgrimage to the next town over.
Right, but you think about that sort of like, you think about how people have been desensitized. You're looking at the quality of something like a Serbian. Is it a Serbian film?
Yeah.
Would you be desperate to see that? Hop on a bus to see that in the cinema?
I've seen a Serbian film.
Yeah, I haven't.
Don't. Just
right. Or like Human Centipede, you know. But that's the sort of like,
because I take that back just very quickly. I shouldn't tell anybody not to watch something, but knowing you the way I do, you're not going to get anything out of a Serbian film other than maybe some mild trauma. It's not worth it.
He's too wholesome.
You are. Yeah, it's different as well. It's one of those. This is something we talk about a lot on this show. It's something we can't really comment on 100% accurately because the times have changed so much. The proliferation of information has changed wildly since 1973. So, I mean, word would get out. People would disobey embargoes and sneak out information. Do you know what I mean? Like, probably we could almost never have a repeat of that these days. I don't think.
I mean, I've been trying to think about, because obviously out of the video nasties era, there have been some very well received films, and I'm trying to even think about whether a film these days would garner that much controversy and also be, well, because often these days you tend to associate controversies with just shock value for shock value's sake.
Yeah, like a Gaspar Noé type film.
Right.
I think, without wanting to get too far ahead of ourselves, I think because of some of the stuff the film contains, I think because of how old Linda Blair was when she was acting some of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's still shocking. It's 50 years old and it's still shocking. To me, anyway.
Oh, yeah. No, for sure. And I'm not saying it isn't, but
I don't know. I can't think of anything, certainly recently, that's been comparable, because I think, I mean, in that high profile of a release, you just wouldn't get that. I don't think. No, people wouldn't allow their kids to do that. I mean, there was a huge stink about it at the time because Linda Blair was so young. The character was 12. Like, she had to do some pretty gnarly stuff and was excellent, might I add. But I think people are arguably even more sensitive these days, particularly when it involves children.
Yeah.
So I'm not convinced that something like this could be made today.
Interesting.
I don't know. Maybe you have a different point of view.
What about any of Lucky McKee's stuff? Does that kind of touch it far enough into, like, thinking of a director who actually can create horrific films but do have a merit to them?
I don't know if I'm just too desensitized. I don't think Lucky McKee's stuff is that shocking. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, mate. I'm not as familiar with his work as other directors, but I'm just trying to think of a similar kind of angle that a more recent film has taken.
Yeah, who directed The Girl Next Door? Was that Lucky McKee?
I think so.
The one that was based on the Jack Ketchum story that was based on the Sylvia Likens case.
I'm pretty sure that's Lucky McKee.
Okay, well then I think that's the best example.
not the one with Elisha Cuthbert.
No, certainly not that one. I think that's probably the best example of his work then. But I think even then, like, the real Sylvia Likens was, I think, about 12 or 13. I might be wrong, and I would hold my hands up as a true crime buff and sort of say that is one of the worst cases of child abuse and murder that I've ever heard. Like, fundamentally changed me as a person. It was that horrendous. But even in the film,
sorry to interrupt. It was Gregory Wilson.
Oh right, I don't know what I'm thinking of then.
Yeah, me neither.
Maybe he did a different Jack Ketchum story, but even in that film, they kind of aged her up. Sylvia Likens was younger in real life, but the actress and the character was an older teen. I think the actress was significantly older.
Yeah, well, I mean, they had a similar thing with The Exorcist. The actual book is a lot more graphic than the film.
Is it really? It's funny because so I hadn't seen The Exorcist for a number of years. I would say because it's one of those films that's so in the public consciousness, particularly within the horror community, it's not one I feel like going back and revisiting very often because it's always kind of omnipresent and it's referenced so much and homaged so much. So I feel like I've seen it way more than I have. And for that reason, I never feel the need to really go back and revisit it. And I'm so glad I did. Spoiler alert. But yeah, it just surprised me in a lot of ways. Like I've seen this film maybe I want to say 3 or 4 times. Not a huge amount considering its reputation. And I remembered most of it, but there were scenes that I was just like, holy shit. If I'd seen this back then, if I'd like been at a cinema in those times, because I think the effects are pretty great as well.
Yeah,
a 50-year-old film. The practical effects.
I mean,
especially since we were talking about. But sorry to interrupt you. Especially since we covered Martin last time around, and that's a film that's kind of praised for its practical effects, and was 4 years after this. This was like incredible. Wildly different budgets. It's not a fair comparison, but just like
of course,
films that were working with the same sort of materials in the same sort of era with the same kind of knowledge. This is head and shoulders above. Yeah, for sure. But just, I mean, from the special effects standpoint, it blew my mind because I was looking at Max von Sydow and I saw that he was about 90 when he died, and that was 2 years back. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense because The Exorcist was so old.
Yeah, The Exorcist was released in 1973.
Yeah.
And he was only about 40 when he filmed that.
It was my age. Fuck off.
It was just makeup. It was just makeup, prosthetics, and that aged him. And I was convinced he was, 80.
That's bananas. That is bananas. I didn't look that up. I assumed he was.
It was like 44 or something like that. He was in his mid-40s when he filmed The Exorcist, and just the effects to age him up were phenomenal.
That's outstanding.
Yeah, I
would have had no idea. I just took him for an old man. Like I knew he was. Damn. Fuck, I'm speechless. That's incredible. That's incredible. So starting right at the beginning. I don't know which version of this that you watched.
I watched the boring version.
The shorter version. What? So how long's that one?
It's 2 hours and 10 minutes ish, I think.
And did the version you watch have the spider walk down the stairs?
No. It was the cut version. Oh, really?
God damn it! I hadn't realised. It got to the end and I was just like, no spider walk. Excuse me. What? Who do I write to? Yeah, what happened? Explain. Why is there still a cut version floating around?
So I don't know why they cut it, but I know that William Peter Blatty wasn't particularly happy with the edit that was made with the original cut.
Blatty or Friedkin?
Blatty, because as the progenitor of the source material, one of those
progenitor.
He obviously had an opinion on how the edit went.
Okay.
And I think what happened was further down the line, Friedkin was worn down effectively, or he eventually caved and put these clips back in to make the version that we, the kind of longer version. I mean, I'm not saying that there was that much, animosity involved, but certainly there was a conflict between the edit that came out in 73 versus what Blatty intended.
See, I read a thing last night that said the one that was released whenever it was, 98, 99, when it was finally released back into the market, that the spider-walk scene was cut from that one. But I think since then, maybe 2004, 2005, William Friedkin put back in the spider-walk scene. It was with specific reference to that scene. I don't know what else was tampered with.
Okay.
But apparently he was never happy with it because you could see sort of visible wires, and it was obviously a stunt woman and it wasn't Linda Blair. And he thought it looked a bit shitty. But apparently the re-release in like 2004 or whenever it was, he CGI'd over the wires and cleaned it up a little bit. And so that's kind of the accepted version now. But that's not what I watched, and I was gutted. I wish I'd known in advance.
Yeah, there were two versions on Prime, so I watched them on Prime and opted for the shorter version.
Damn it, Philip!
I know. I should have known in advance to watch the longer version.
I feel like I don't know if I'm confused, because I have convinced myself that I've seen a version with the spider walk, but then
I'm okay.
But I don't know if it's because I've seen that. But that scene's been uploaded to YouTube like 1 billion times,
right? So
I don't know if I've just seen it and retconned the memory of having seen this film to include it, or if I actually saw the unedited version.
Interesting. So I guess as the owner of the DVD, you'd probably only be watching it on that DVD. It's not like you would have caught it on TV or...
So this is a recent purchase.
Okay.
The original Exorcist was one of those really shitty cardboard cases. Do you remember? Like the fold over one that you had a little bit of plastic that clipped in. Terrible. And I was desperate to see The Exorcist 3 a few years ago because I'd never seen it until recently. And spoiler alert, love that one too. We may end up covering Exorcist 3 at some point because I want to make you watch that. I'm
about to say it'll give me an excuse to watch it. I probably then should watch Exorcist 2 as well to...
Oh, no, don't do that.
Get up to speed.
The Heretic is not good. But yeah, so I found a box set for relatively cheap, and it had, which blew my mind, all 5 Exorcist films on it.
5?
I had no idea there were 5.
2 more than I thought of.
So I have some information that I found out last night that kind of blew my tiny mind.
Okay.
I remember reading vaguely, I've never seen either of them, but there was a prequel to The Exorcist. Obviously plucked my DVD box set off the shelf last night to watch the film, and was surprised to learn that there were 2 Exorcist prequels. And I was just like, this doesn't sound... And they were like 2004 and 2005. And it piqued my curiosity. So I did a bit of digging. And apparently, Paul Schrader started making an Exorcist prequel. And the studio hated it, so they shelved it.
Okay.
They then hired Rennie Harlin with what was ostensibly the same script that they made changes to make a new Exorcist prequel. That didn't go over well either. And they ended up funding Schrader to finish his version and then just released both a year apart. It's so weird. And it's Stellan Skarsgård as young Father Merrin in both.
Really?
I'm so curious to watch them now.
Is that in your box set?
They're both in it. Yeah.
Okay.
I wish I'd had time to see them before recording this, but I literally did not know that was a thing that existed until last night. And now it's all I can think about.
It'll be so weird because I'm sure they're roughly the same plot, and with having Skarsgård in it.
Yeah. It sounds
Must be
like
super
it.
confusing to watch them both in quick succession.
I did read an article that talked about both, and they kind of mentioned the marked differences between them. So it sounds like they're very sort of stylistically different. I mean, it's Schrader and Harlan, very different filmmakers.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm so keen to see them both. But anyway,
We'll have to report back next minisode.
I thought that was a fun little fact. Something else that struck me the first kind of 15 minutes of this film is how similar in tone it is, obviously thematically as well, to The Omen. Again, like...
Yeah, I see that.
I don't know how much the Satanic Panic was kind of informed by media rather than inspired by. Because I was just thinking last night, there was so much, like, devil panic in the 70s, in the lead up to what became the Satanic Panic. And it does make me wonder if films like this kind of informed that, like, put the idea in people's heads and then that disseminated and they, I don't know, kind of, wrong word, but demonized, you know, specific media and D&D and whatever else. What came first, the chicken or the egg?
Interesting. Yeah, I've never really considered that. The thing I'm going to say about the intro, actually, and it's weird because I think it probably more has to do with the quality of the film than anything else. Like, I would have watched that intro. If I didn't like this movie, I would have come out and watched that intro and thought that was unnecessary. That did very little to the story.
What, even when you get to the end, you don't think it was necessary?
Well, I mean, kind of. I mean, I suppose it does a little bit, but not significantly so. And it makes me wonder whether. I mean, maybe I'm not giving it enough credit. Maybe I should probably rethink it. But just
no, have an opinion and stick to it, Philip.
But like, if this was a terrible movie and I hated it, I would have thought, yeah, that should be cut.
Okay.
Because it's just unnecessary fluff. But watching a film that is good and seeing that, I think, oh no, that's detail.
It must be purposeful.
It's interesting because I think both are, both in terms of the actual film, both would serve to explore the world of the movie and explain it. Both would have the same purpose, and yet my opinions on whether they were necessary probably would vastly differ.
Okay. I disagree to some extent. I think I'm going to be very predictable here and very non-controversial for a change. I think this is a near perfect film.
Oh no, I'm saying.
No, I know, but I know.
Appreciated it.
You're being more charitable because you think it's an excellent film, but you think in a lesser film it would have been cut, or should have been cut, rather.
That would have been my instinct, I think.
Right. Whereas I love that because it piqued my interest straight off the bat, and then it completely does a 180, and you're like, well, why was that relevant? And it's completely irrelevant until it becomes incredibly relevant. And I think it does a really good job at sort of introducing you to Father Merrin, and I mean, it's almost wordless, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of looking, a lot of staring, a lot of like gazes across the sand.
And the first time you see the Pazuzu statue, obviously, and that's just become so iconic. And I think it's quite important because he's barely in it, but he's so integral. And I think the comments that Reagan / Captain Howdy / Pazuzu come out with at the end, like, indicate that, that there are callbacks to another exorcism he performed that lasted months and nearly killed him, and you kind of there are breadcrumbs that lead you to believe this is the same demon. Like, this is not the first time he's had to deal with Pazuzu. I don't know, it's interesting because he was the only one who'd seen the Pazuzu statue, and then you get that flash of it in Reagan's bedroom, and I don't know, I think it's all very purposeful.
Yeah, oh no, for sure. I think, I guess there was a thought I had at the time when I was watching that intro, because it's quite a meandering introduction. It's not like they have a couple of minutes and then into the movie itself. There's a good kind of quarter an hour spent with Merrin wandering around Iraq and looking at people, and that it's quite a meandering intro, and it certainly doesn't drop you in it quickly. And I think for a lesser movie, that would have felt like it had gone on too long. That's kind of what I'm getting at. I think.
No, I think I understand.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily unnecessary, but being that indulgent about it. I think it would have been boring in a lesser quality film.
Okay. I maybe agree with that. I would say in the hands of a lesser director, it could have gone very differently. Yeah. It's interesting you say that, though, because I did make a note about how I think it was very specific to 70s cinema, and I'm not going to repeat myself, because obviously in the last show I talked about how much I love the era, how much I love the filming techniques, the little flourishes and like the long takes and the slow those extreme slow zooms and the tracking shots and the pans and the split diopters. It gives me goosebumps. I cannot tell you. But another thing in 70s cinema, because of the long takes, there was a lot of in good films at least, there was a lot of character work, more so than I think we get now. I think perhaps because audiences, this is going to make me some enemies. I think in general, audiences do have slightly shorter attention spans.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And I would include myself in that to some degree as well. I think smartphones have a lot to answer for.
And social media, our content is consumed at a much quicker pace because everything's designed to be.
It's immediate.
Next.
Yeah, we want instant gratification. So films with a much slower pace, like films from the 70s, you really have to sit with. And I can see why a lot of people don't like that. And it is very different to the way films are made now. But one thing that really struck me while watching this is it's kind of brilliant in that there's no real exposition. None of it is lazy. It's all so intricately written. We get so much character work in that first hour. So much character work. But every bit of character work also moves the plot forward. It's brilliant. And it never really hit me until watching it last night how brilliantly that's done. Everything serves a purpose. Every interaction, every little glance or observation we make about a character doing a certain thing, we learn something more about them, and it informs the plot.
Yeah, and I think that also emphasizes that these are people. They're not like, they don't exist to serve the plot. The plot is a result of them reacting according to their character.
Yeah.
I think in too many horror movies you have, like all the kind of every single horror movie that has a ensemble teen cast who are
there's stock characters.
You don't get a sense that they have a life outside of the exact events that are going on right this moment, right?
Yeah.
Whereas there's all sorts of...
Sorry, again, to interrupt you. Even the really well-written ones, like something like Scream, that was so kind of important to the rewriting of the slasher genre. Yes, the characters are reasonably well-rounded, but there's still, like, you can pick out kind of the stereotypes that you find in almost every school setting. And
yeah, I think Scream's another one to pick up on, just because it is an exploration of that genre, and I think it must be hard to do that without using the stereotypes that the genre has.
Yeah, all right, that's fair. I think my point was just like even the greats kind of are susceptible to it.
No, I know what you mean. But I just really appreciate that. I really appreciate looking at these characters and understanding and seeing them as actual rounded characters with depth and purposes and arcs, and it's quite a rare thing in a lot of films these days.
Yeah, absolutely. The characters are really given room to breathe. One of my favourite scenes is Ellen Burstyn's character. Is it Chris? I want to say Chris.
Mm-hmm. Chris, yeah.
She's on the phone to a hotel trying to get through to her ex-husband, Reagan's dad, just losing her mind at having been on hold for 20 minutes. And I'm just like, I love that. I love that I get to know more about you and how fierce you are just for this, like, otherwise kind of throwaway. Because if anything, I think the point of that scene is to inform the fact that Reagan's got an absentee father and, is therefore, not had the ideal upbringing and is maybe more susceptible to things like, I don't know, demonic possession. That to me is the purpose of the scene, but the fact that it has like the duality of like, oh, we get to know a shit ton more about her mum as well, is really, really good writing.
Yeah, because it's also character, like, again, how they react within the circumstances, as well as kind of exposition. Or like you say, about her absentee dad, but you also know that Chris can really stand up for herself when she needs to, and she isn't one to take things lightly.
As a northerner, I'm a big fan of bolshy women. So I very much appreciate Ellen Burstyn in this role. So how do you feel about our principal characters then? Because we've talked a little bit about Chris, a little bit about Regan. What about Father Karras?
I like him. I think the decision to show him caring for his mum and the subsequent guilt when she passes on is, again, really informs that character well, because he is genuine in his beliefs. He's a genuinely good person. Well, and trying to do the best anyway, best that he can.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Okay.
Because there's that. There's that really notable scene just after we meet him when he kind of sees the homeless person, the person begging on the street, and he kind of turns away. And then we find out a little bit later on that he's losing his faith. He's doubting his beliefs. And I think that makes me love his character more, because not only, obviously, it's, the age-old plot device of like, this is a really flawed human being. Oh, but he's going to have a redemption arc. But I love the nuance. I love the shades of grey in his character. Yeah.
No, you are right. You are right. And it was completely wrong of me to say what it is.
I think you're right. Like the inner conflict about how much he cared for his mum, and then
he's definitely trying to be a good person.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was getting at. And I think these sort of films are a perfect opportunity to have a religious character who is having a crisis of faith. It's often a thing. You look at I think The Last Exorcism did it. I think Signs did it. It's a thing, because it's such a personal thing for a religious person to be going through, because that arguably shapes their entire existence. Being religious.
Yeah, your belief system,
their morals and their belief system. And that's quite a significant thing to have shaken.
It's kind of intrinsic to who you are. If you have a belief system where you are all in, then it is absolutely a part of who you are. So yeah, I think it's been aped a lot since this, but I think this is probably one of the most notable instances, I would say. Yeah.
It's always very difficult to kind of talk about films that do it more recently, because there is that precedent of The Exorcist having done it first. And it's like we talked about with kind of the Halloween and such, is that, yes, they use stereotypes, but at the time they weren't stereotypes.
Yeah.
They formed those conventions that the genre,
still
became known for. Yeah.
Outside of meta slashes, at least. What did you think of the acting? because one of the things that really struck me, at least, was I think it sort of speaks volumes to the caliber of actor, and I think it's unusual to see a horror film of this era with such established, talented actors and a budget of 11 million. It was pretty rare at the time, I believe. But one thing I really love about this film is that at the heart of it, it's a really genuine story about a mother and a daughter and their love for each other, and it feels real.
The one thing I was a bit iffy about is when Reagan was kind of her normal self at the start, the way Linda Blair was acting felt a little bit put on, I suppose. Like
I didn't get that at all.
It was in the scene when she got out the Ouija board, I think, or it was talking about the horse. I think the horse that she
she wanted a
was
horse.
looking at something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it felt almost like she was. It felt like she was acting rather than being an actual 12-year-old girl. But that being said,
she's the daughter of an actress. Don't forget.
Well, that is true. That is true. Actually, yeah, that's a fair point.
Maybe she just has a flair for the theatrics.
There's probably something there, to be fair. But having grown up around around acting and the stage and whatever film. But that being said, my favourite scenes in this movie were just the scenes where the possessed Reagan is lying in bed and just exuding this quiet menace. And they're just the conversations, just the talks. Like the talking, the conversations that they're having with Merrin and Callis, and there was just so much menace there, and it was great because nothing was happening. They were just talking, but it was I loved it so much.
She was brilliant. And
I obviously mentioned to Mercedes Mccambridge, who I know was shafted at the time.
Was that voice? Actor?
Yeah, she provided the voice for for the possessed Reagan, but at the time wanted to. I think she didn't want to. There was a reason for it. It was something like not wanting to take away from Linda Blair's performance or something similar. So she neglected to have her name credited.
Okay,
but then I think changed her mind later on, and then there was a bit of a conflict over kind of her credit in the film.
That's a shame. She definitely deserves the credit. I mean,
and looking at it, she did a lot of they actually when she was recording the voice work, they actually strapped her down. She insisted on doing these things to really evoke. Basically, yeah. I think she was chewing on eggshells or something similar, and then there was all sorts of. I might be misremembering, but there was all sorts of stuff she was doing to try and really kind of create a believable performance. And for that to go basically uncredited is a bit of a shame.
Wow. Does she have a credit now? Has that been changed?
I didn't notice, actually. I mean, it will be on IMDb, I'm sure, but
I hope she got a lifetime supply of Hull Soothers afterwards as well.
Lifetime supply of pea soup.
Yeah, oh God, no, never. You think anybody involved in this would want to eat pea soup again?
I think she started chain smoking as well.
Oh wow.
To really get that voice.
God damn, Christian Bale, watch out.
And for saying she's a bit of a footnote in the film's
sad
legacy is a shame.
It wouldn't have been. I mean, if it was just Linda Blair kind of putting on a hoarse voice, that would have been shit. She made it. That's such a shame. Well, hopefully she's getting the recognition she deserves now.
Yeah. I hope so.
But going back to Linda Blair very briefly, it's kind of curious to me that she didn't have a bigger career, because I think we get to see Reagan at kind of a number of different stages during the possession and as herself. And obviously the scenes where they're trying to figure out what it is that's wrong with her and they're taking her to the doctors and she's having what I imagine was some sort of brutal MRI spinal tap thing. That looked horrifying. The blood spurt. Oh my God.
That was actually the scene where most people fainted, I think.
Was it really?
Yeah, because gross. it was so authentic, and the actor who played the surgeon was actually a real surgeon.
Okay.
Or the guy who played the surgeon. So there's a lot of truth to that scene. You know, it was all genuine equipment. There's a lot of
The equipment
so
itself was terrifying. I've had an MRI.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not that bad. As long as you've got some headphones on and you can sit still, it's not that bad. The sheer noise of the machinery and like holy shit. 70s have a lot to answer for.
Maybe that's why she didn't act much afterwards.
Thank God for modern medicine. But also, I love how 70s this is. Can you imagine taking your kid to the hospital and the doctor comes out to give you the results of the examination, but lights up a cigarette first? What the fuck? It was like something out of Garth Marenghi.
Couldn't imagine it.
And then she started freaking out, and I was waiting for a man to slap her and call her hysterical. Just like, that seems very era appropriate.
There was a shot of outside the hospital, I think. I was like, that reminds me too much of Garth Marenghi right now.
Yeah, it's a shame.
I mean, certainly I know that's why they changed the look of her in Exorcist 2. Because
of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
No, not Garth Marenghi. Because of how much she hated the experience of having the prosthetic put on her.
Okay.
They're like, yes, I'll join. Yes, I will be in this film. However, that needs to change.
Okay.
So there was certainly did have an impact on her. The actual filming process of Exorcist 1, of her career, certainly her career choices.
I mean, what else did Linda Blair do? I can think of like one other film off the top of my head, and that was a revenge movie called Savage Streets, which incidentally is great and also stars Linnea Quigley. But I know she's done other stuff. I just can't think of it off the top of my head. And after that performance, you would have expected her to have like to be like a Macaulay Culkin or something. Not that I'm saying he's got a stellar career right now, but everybody knows who he is at least.
Yeah, I mean, she's been in roughly one or two things for a significant amount of years following The Exorcist.
Yeah.
Looking at her filmography now.
At least she seems like she's kept her shit together mostly. She didn't go like full Edward Furlong. So there's that.
Yeah. I mean, that's saying something, because I suppose that's probably a lot to do with the filming process. Like, if you imagine someone like Kubrick doing,
oh god, that would scar you for life.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
I read a
imagine if Kubrick had directed The Exorcist. How different would that have been? There'd have been a lot more shouting. In the film and on the set.
Of Scatman Crothers in The Shining and his filming of, because I don't think it was Kubrick's first choice. He wanted someone else to play, but Crothers stepped in and obviously acted throughout and obviously dealt with Kubrick's foibles.
Yeah, is that what we're calling them?
But then his next film from that was a Clint Eastwood film.
Oh no!
Who was basically known for doing one and done takes. Like, that's your take, that's your go. And so from having like hundreds of takes for each scene to one and done, must have been such whiplash.
Hundreds of takes at the hands of an outstanding filmmaker, but also a notorious bully. Jesus Christ. Fair play to him. This is an obvious thing to say. This film is very influential.
Yes.
I think I'd forgotten just how influential, though.
Okay.
And not just films, because, I mean, to me, the obvious stuff is like the Conjuring movies, very heavy influence on those. Shades of Ouija, Origin of Evil, the good one.
The good one.
Yeah. I don't know, like, I remember reading about the Enfield poltergeist as well. I mean, clearly those little girls just saw The Exorcist, right? I'm like,
and just jumped.
Go on, just put on an old man voice. Bang some pipes, I don't know. Wait, no, that was Ghost Watch. But you know what I mean? Like, it's up there, isn't it, with one of the most influential.
Oh, for sure,
and
like
parodied. Obviously, I think the two go hand in hand.
There's a reason I said, it's the horror film, right? It's one of the ones you think of when you say horror film, or certainly I do, at least.
I don't know anyone who dislikes this film. Even to the point of, I watched it with Dan last night, and he's not a fan of 70s stuff generally.
Yeah.
Certainly the 70s set horror, 70s made horror movies that I've watched with him, he's not been a huge fan of.
Even, and you know me, I'd agree with that as well.
Yeah. And he I know he'd seen The Exorcist when he was a kid. Well, that's what he remembered. It's a miracle he turned out all right. You don't need to tell me. But even he, by the end of it, was just like, that's good, isn't it? It's a good film. Like, well, faint praise, but yes, Dan.
Like, I'm jumping ahead to like my wrap up, but I'm glad I rewatched this because having watched it first, it's very easy to fall into the trap of hearing, "Oh, this is the scariest movie ever," and then watching it and thinking,
lame.
"Oh, that wasn't that scary," and therefore jumping to the conclusion that therefore it wasn't that good.
Yeah.
Whereas going back and looking at it and actually understanding that yes, I probably won't be that scared, I can actually appreciate the film for what it is.
Do you not find this to be scary?
Not really.
Do you not?
No.
I think this is spooky AF. And
it's not like I'm I don't ever have. I've never caught myself hiding behind the cushion or something.
Oh no, I don't mean. All right, so perhaps my fear comes from religious upbringing.
Maybe.
And just getting a kick out of religious horror in general. But yeah, there are certain scenes. There's even like a couple jump scares, which was rare for that kind of time period. Like the bit where Chris is in the attic, I believe, with the candle, and then all of a sudden, like the flame goes crazy into her face, which I'm pretty confident was heavy influence on that bit with Lily Taylor going down the stairs in The Conjuring. But anyway, made me jump out my skin. Yeah.
That one.
Sure. But you know what I mean? Like, you can see shades of it, can't you?
For sure.
But it's rare. It's rare for like these kind of atmospheric, moody 70s horror films to have jump scare, or what we know to be, to modern audiences, to be a jump scare. It's interesting. I don't remember that.
I think there's a preconception, a misconception maybe, of jump scares as being like the cheap way out, the easy way out. Because there's kind of a difference between startling your audience and genuinely unsettling them. And too often people go for jump scares because that's the easy visceral reaction that's making people jump. Yeah. People are startled, but then there's no real lasting damage per se, because, you know, you've been jumped, you have a bit of a laugh about how silly that was, and then you calm down, and then the rest of the film carries on. Whereas to get under your skin requires a lot more care, a lot more work, and talent. Yes, you can have both, obviously, and this film does. But it is interesting. Hadn't picked up on that, I don't think. Okay.
And also something I wanted to touch on very, very briefly, because I didn't see a huge amount of it. Because this was a rewatch, obviously, and because I hadn't seen it in a long time, I watched it in the frame of mind where I was kind of trying to look for symbolism in the film. I didn't spot a huge amount, so don't get too excited. I fear I've built this up too much.
But I spent ages looking for symbolism. I didn't find any. What's your next point?
There was a crucifix. No. As with anything that sort of deals with demonic horror, there were a lot of dogs. And I noticed that right at the start. And I think, so one of the scenes where Father Merrin is in Iraq.
Yep.
There are kind of fighting dogs behind... Is it behind the Pazuzu statue the first time he sees it?
It's certainly around it, isn't it?
There's a bunch of, like, eerie shit, like, you know...
Like the semi-blind blacksmith and
Oh, well, now I feel mean for calling him eerie, but yeah.
I think, but you like
yes,
that was what purpose
like
it served.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that was why you have these cuts of these sort of things happening, is because they are designed to unsettle you.
Yeah,
you know, not that whether they did or not is a different question, but I can see why he's. Yeah.
But also,
I'll shut up.
There were another couple of instances of kind of growling dogs. It's like spoopy dogs throughout.
Mm-hmm.
And there are even scenes where Father Karras is with Reagan, and it just sounds like there's a faint sort of dog growl.
Oh, really?
Yeah, did you not clock that? Like, it could have been coming from a human, but it sounded like it was at least meant to mimic like just a very faint dog growl.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know about you, I have got to the habit of always watching movies with subtitles now.
Right, okay.
So, it might be that I heard growling and saw a caption that said Reagan growling and
right,
didn't think anything of it, but I could be mistaken.
I don't think it was intended to be coming from her. Like, she wasn't sort of doing anything that would indicate she was making growling noises. I think it was just there in the background, and it was really, really creepy. But I did a bit of Googling, and it just seemed to be like in old folklore, basically black dogs, specifically black dogs with red eyes, were thought of as like, I don't know, kind of harbingers of death, harbingers of doom.
Omens, weren't they?
Yeah, bad omens.
Yeah.
Because there were quite a few scenes with dogs in The Omen, weren't there? If I remember rightly. I feel like we commented on it in that show. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I thought the scene when the doctors are deliberating what could be wrong with Reagan, and I made a point of counting how many people were in the room. There were 13, but one of them was a notary, so there were 12 doctors.
Okay.
Which fits with 12 disciples, and like 12 is such a biblical number, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was interesting, and again, almost certainly not an accident. But yeah, there were bits and pieces, but I didn't see as much as I thought I might.
Yeah, you would have thought this film would have been chock full because it's the religious angle has such a presence within the movie.
Yeah.
And certainly Friedkin is a with a capital D, he's a director, right?
Yes.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, no, that's interesting. I can fully see how the use of kind of dogs in the film, even just, I don't know where the mythology comes from, but hellhounds, they've always been associated with.
Yeah, I know some of it is
evil
English
spirits
folklore,
and such.
But I think it's probably one of those things where nobody really knows where it originated, because there was probably a lot of parallel thinking from,
of course,
religions, kind of bits of religions being proliferated around the world by people traveling, and blurred the lines a little bit. But yeah, so I don't know how I feel about exorcisms as a device in films.
Okay.
Obviously, back then, great, groundbreaking, but it's been done so much since, and I don't think I've seen it done particularly differently since this film.
Yeah, well, now that you mentioned that, they all follow the same trajectory, don't they? They introduce the character who's possessed. You kind of see spooky stuff. There's always I don't think she's possessed. I think it must be some sort of mental illness. And then, it's not anything. There's nothing wrong with her. You'd better see a priest. And the priest goes, I need evidence before I can speak to the Vatican. And then, that's a familiar story now, isn't it?
It's very familiar, and I understand why
inevitably there is a possession, and there's the big end, and then
I know
it all wraps up
based on a real thing. Well, I mean, not necessarily a real thing, but exorcisms have happened, not in the literal sense that I'm suggesting people were demonically possessed and then exorcised. But in the sense that the Catholic Church, at various points in history have performed what they believed to be exorcisms. Oh God, a line that really made me chuckle, where they were talking about how the exorcisms were just like the dirty little footnote in Catholicism, and that the Catholic Church was embarrassed of them. And I was just like, that's what the Catholic Church is embarrassed of? Exorcisms? You sure about
all
that?
The things.
Yeah. Not the rampant paedophilia. We're going with exorcisms, are we? Cool. I don't know. That really made me laugh. It's just like, you sure about that?
I guess that's the reason why they do follow the same trajectory, though, because
they were a real thing. Like there was a text that they had to follow,
but they've got to circumvent the idea that it's a superstition by now.
Yeah,
the idea of devils existing and possessions happening isn't a thing. I mean, it's the equivalent of I've got no bars, right?
Oh God, yeah.
They've got to get around that somehow.
Guys, I've got no service. I'm never going to get this demon out of me. Wait, hang on. Yeah, I'm kind of over exorcisms in terms of being used as a trope in horror movies, but it was never done better than in The Exorcist.
Yeah, and I think again that has a lot to do with the fact that it set the narrative.
Just some of the shit that they did, like so apparently the Jason Miller, Father Karras, when Reagan pukes the pea soup at him, apparently he didn't know that was going to happen. So his reaction of like disgust and surprise is completely genuine.
What actually happened? He was expecting his chest.
Right. Oh no.
And I don't know whether it was a misfire or that was just a bit of a funny jape they pulled.
Oh, jokes.
Hit her in the face, and he wasn't happy.
Yeah, understandably. I think I'm with Miller on that one. Gross, man. But yeah, I just think some of the techniques that they use and some of the effects, like obviously the really famous ones where Regan's head turns around, and just so well done. I constantly had to remind myself that this film is 50 years old.
Yeah, for sure. I was surprised how... Yeah, it will be 50 next year, won't it?
Yeah,
wow.
It's nuts.
I was surprised how many films were just straight up filmed in broad daylight.
Oh yeah.
How many scenes? Sorry.
Like it's wild. The first time we hear Tubular Bells, it's just following Chris home in broad daylight. Nothing creepy's happening. It's not even a particularly like atmospheric scene or a setup. But that music is so synonymous with like being creepy.
And it's used twice in the film.
Yeah.
There's that one scene where Chris is walking back home.
Yeah.
And then one in the end credits, and that's it.
I know, isn't that nuts?
It's crazy. It's crazy. But like the scene where, for example, you know, she's in inverted commas having a fit. You know, she's kind of sitting up and down. I don't know how else to describe it.
Thrashing.
You know, thrashing around the bed, the bed shaking. You know, they're all filmed in broad daylight. I think that's a brave move. And I think that shows a lot of confidence, because the easiest thing in the world, again, would be to hide it in darkness and let the atmosphere help, direct the audience's emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also the lazy way.
Yeah.
It's the easy way, so it's the lazy way, but they were like fully, nah, man, let's do this. Let's see all of it. And arguably, it's an even bolder move when the effects could have made or broken this film. So to film it all...
made or brave this film.
All right.
That's where you were going, wasn't it?
I don't know where my brain was going. Mate, my brain is like melting out of my ears right now. And you're lucky I'm still able to form a coherent sentence. I am so warm. Yeah, maybe that's what I was going to say. But the only other thing I really want to talk about before we start wrapping up are firstly just how shocking some of the scenes of the possession are, And also the choice of language.
I loved it.
But I hear the C word quite a lot in my daily life. Maybe that's to do with who I surround myself with. Who knows? And it still has the power to shock in this film because it's coming out of the mouth of a child, which is crazy. And obviously the really, really infamous scene, the kind of bloody masturbating with a crucifix. Holy shit. I knew it was coming. I braced myself for it, and I still crossed my legs. Horrendous.
They do an interesting thing because oftentimes they don't really lead you into a shocking scene. They just hard cut straight in.
Yeah.
You might have a bit of a preamble where a character is coming to Reagan's door or or something similar. But from the moment the camera cuts into her room, she is mid whatever she's doing, whether it's the convulsions in the bed, whether it's the crucifix scene. And I think that alone is quite shocking because it's done so harshly. It's so stark. You're just there and have to experience it in full Technicolor.
Oh God, it's it's going to take a while. I need some brain bleach. I think once we're done recording, I might go and watch some kitten videos. But it's incredible to me that still has the power to shock. And I've seen just about everything at this point. I've seen, like we talked about at the head of the show, I've seen a Serbian film. And this film still somehow shocks me more. And I think perhaps it is because it was like, it's a real film. It's not a movie. It's a film.
Yeah.
So I think it's really shocking in that context.
I'd agree with that. I think any sort of like Human Centipede or Serbian film,
you
whatever,
expect it.
Like you kind of expect it, and it's gross, but you're kind of like, well, this is what I expected, and
this is what I signed up for. I guess
this is what I signed up for, right? Yeah, and it's more of a test of endurance than anything.
Yeah.
Whereas there's actual things to enjoy in The Exorcist, and so the darker stuff is all that more contrasted with the rest of the movie because it's it's less expected, I suppose.
Yeah, it's funny though, isn't it? Of the films we've kind of covered in the last year or two, we've covered some really controversial stuff, like Cannibal Holocaust, for example. You can still watch that and go, yeah, I get why it was a big deal at the time, but it looks fake as fuck. And, this, I get it. Even now, I get it. And I think that's kind of incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Interesting you say that. I think I'd probably disagree.
Okay.
I think I felt more uncomfortable watching Cannibal Holocaust than I did The Exorcist.
Oh, I felt uncomfortable. It's not a comfortable watch, that's for sure. Yeah. It's horrific. But I think that's probably more, personally speaking, probably far more to do with the animal cruelty and the animal killing than it is about, I know humans are capable of terrible things. And I know it was all fake. And I know the stories behind it. I knew the stories behind it before I even watched Cannibal Holocaust back when I was a teenager. So for that reason, I'm just like, it's a film. And I don't know what it is. I think it is just like, there's something Oscar-y about the Exorcist, and you just don't expect a child talking about, like, saying things like your cunting daughter and shoving her mum's face in her private parts. You know what I mean? You don't expect it.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. It is that. It's that contrast, isn't it? It's because it's quite a wholesome is a bad word, but
it's not wholesome.
It starts off. There's a clear, strong relationship between Reagan and Chris, and it ends better for Reagan and Chris. So It does. There is that upwards kind of emotional trajectory throughout the movie. So I guess, you're right. Like, because it does sink so low otherwise, it becomes all the more shocking for it.
So now that we're at the end, and now you've just said it ends quite well for Chris and Reagan, obviously it doesn't end very well for Father Karras. And
not particularly.
I have thoughts about this that didn't really strike me until last night. Because obviously he's a lapsed Catholic. Well, at this point, I mean, are you to assume he's found his faith again? I guess so, right?
I mean, it's so this is the thing that one of the things that actually frustrated me in the film, because you've got him talking to Reagan, and I'm backtracking a little. You've got him talking to Reagan or Pazuzu, and Pazuzu is literally opening up drawers with with his mind. And even after that...
Careful, don't misgender Pazuzu, whatever you do.
But even after that, Karras was a bit like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, still not convinced. I don't know, I see his sacrifice at the end as like the ultimate sacrifice, because to me, I think by that point, the fact that he was involved in the exorcism at all, the fact that he agreed to it, and the fact that he'd witnessed what he had won him back over to religion.
Yeah.
But knowing that to the Catholic Church, suicide is a cardinal sin, that means you don't get into heaven, that makes his sacrifice even more poignant to me, I think. And like so fucking tragic. Yeah.
No, for sure. And I think given the events of the film, you'd be hard pushed to deny that certainly demons aren't real.
Well, quite.
and it stands to reason, therefore, that God is probably real as well. So I would agree that he has found his faith. Yeah. So I think you're right. Like the tragedy of him.
It's sort of amplified to me.
Yeah, the actual self-sacrifice to keep others protected, and it is interesting. I didn't pick up on it at the time. It does seem to be that it's always about Karras. Yeah, there's a lot of lines throughout that indicate that Reagan is just a vessel so that Pazuzu can get to Karras.
Okay.
Because there's a couple of nods towards that, and that's quite an interesting take, and I think it'll probably recontextualize it on a rewatch if I was to revisit it.
Well, I definitely don't think I'm going to leave it another 10 years before I watch this film again.
Yeah, same.
I think I agreed with those that thought it was kind of the pinnacle of horror cinema before the rewatch. And I doubly agree with them now. And I thoroughly enjoyed talking about it. What I'm going to try and do before the next mini-sode is watch at least one of the prequels. So I have to satisfy my curiosity.
Very excited for that.
Who knew there was an Exorcist cinematic universe? Or the Pazuzu CU, if you will.
Oh my God. Should we just wrap up the episode now? I think we've peaked.
Oh no, if that's the peak, we're in trouble. Yeah, I don't really think we need to do the usual wrap up. It tops best of lists for a reason, doesn't it?
Yeah, and again, reiterating, I'm glad I revisited it, because it's hard to separate a film's what's the word I'm looking for?
The merit of the film itself from its influence? Or...
Yeah, basically.
I agree.
And I first time I went into it, I thought, well, it wasn't that scary, therefore it's not that good of a movie. Because I was so caught up in it being scary that I forgot to look at it as a film.
Yeah.
And
I think I prefer it now that I'm a bit older and able to appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah, oh no, for sure. And I'm watching it as a film and appreciating it for what it is. It's so good. It's such a great movie.
Awesome.
Reputation was the word I was looking for.
Reputation, yeah. Its reputation is well deserved.
Yeah, but it's hard to separate from the film's reputation as being scary from its actual qualities as a film.
Yeah,
but
it's definitely hard to imagine people fainting during this film now. But, you know, however shocking it still is, we've definitely changed as an audience. But yeah,
For sure.
So that's it. That's The Exorcist. I was so nervous. I hope that didn't show during this episode, because why we picked this, I don't really know. But as soon as it came down to it, I was just like, oh, no pressure then. It's fine. We're just going to talk about one of the most influential horror movies of all fucking. Oh, no. But we did it. We made it through. And we didn't overheat.
That is true. Despite me having shut the windows halfway through because of outside noises.
Fucking church bells. As atmospheric as that would have been
I was
have
about
in
to
the
say,
background.
it seems poignant.
It does. Oh dear. Right. I don't know what we're doing next time. Exorcist 3? Who knows?
Let's do it.
But until then, if you fancy more of this, if you enjoyed what you just heard, we do a mini-sode every other week. So if you want to sign up to our Patreon, you get new content every single week, double the content for just £2
and if you want to hear
a
what
month.
Sarah thought of the Exorcist prequel,
hell yeah! Now I have to watch it. Now I have to commit. We've got all of the regular social medias that aren't TikTok because we're too old for that. But you can find us at Radio Gore Press on all of the things. And I think that's about it. So until next time, thank you for listening and stay spooky, and we'll catch you in a fortnight.
Bye-bye.